Well, happy Sunday, everybody. A happy Sunday in April. Welcome to our April live chat. So we're going to have fun today talking about something that doesn't sound like fun at all. I mean, when I sent out the announcement about Overcast sky, I could almost hear the sighs because Overcast doesn't sound sexy at all. But you'll be surprised. So I wanted as you begin to log in and join us, those of you who are YouTube studio insiders, those of you who are members, go ahead and start checking in and let us know where you're from, and so that we can kind of see who's here and who's going to be asking questions today. So while we're doing that, as I always do, I want to give you just a little bit of a heads up about how we do the live chat. Of course, those of you who are regulars to our live chats know, but some who might be here for the first time might not know that we have to kind of make it possible to see what the questions are, because if we left the chat box open for everybody to ask questions, then it runs so fast we can't catch the questions. And so the way we came up with that was to set up a membership, which is really a kind of a fun thing, because not only are you a member of the Studio Insiders, which is what the membership is called, but you also get other perks. And all the memberships on YouTube are set up that way. Somehow you get extra perks in addition to being a member. So membership is just $4.99 a month, just pocket change, and we promise we're not going to inflate it. So what was? Oh yes, the membership. So the members can ask questions, and we build the program however it moves along. We build it based on the members' questions after we get the introduction through. So we see people beginning to check in. I'm happy to see Maurice from Amsterdam, I'll say it in a minute, Amsterdam, and Debbie from Sarasota, Rich from New Jersey, Courtney from New Hampshire. So we've already got a good representation, not only of the country, but the world, which I just love the fact that people from all over, not just our country, but people from all over the world can tune into these live chats. It gives us a far-reaching venue for our messages. So that's the way it works. Now, we will, is it Rhea from Massachusetts? I could never say that word. Massachusetts. Anyway. and I don't know if I pronounced your name right, but you have to forgive me on my pronunciation. It's just not exactly top notch all the time, especially on names. So anyway, so today we always have a theme for the live chat, and I always like to keep the questions centered around whatever our theme is, so we can have some consistency and kind of build the chat on whatever we're talking about. So the theme today is painting under overcast skies, and I see is I wanna from Sweden. Wow! So we've already got Amsterdam and Sweden represented. Excellent. Anyway, what am I saying? Oh, yes, about themes. And you know what? Really, the way that this thing works, it ends up being pretty much the theme of the month. Whatever we're concentrating on, we sort of make it a theme of the month. So we will base our monthly workshops on that theme. For those of you who are not familiar with our program, we have workshops every month on specific things having to do with the way we compose paintings. And then we also, for the Studio Insiders, every second Sunday, the Studio Insiders get a little clip that's we find somehow related to a theme. It's usually taken from one of the lesson downloads that we have available. So but the big thing that everybody enjoys so much, we get lots of positive feedback on, is that when you're a member, you get a free video lesson every single month for as long as you're a member. We send you a coupon code. You go to the lessons website, that's DianneMize.com, and Dianne is spelled with 2 N's, don't forget that, so you can get there, DianneMize.com. That's where the lessons are. And then we have our academy, DianneMizeAcademy.com. So there are 2 websites where we have teaching stuff going on. And Dianne Mize Academy, we have full-length courses. Those courses are the same courses that are presented in the workshops. So the workshop students get first dibs on whatever that particular course is, and then about 3 months later, it's converted into a course on the academy. So that's how that works. But today we have the YouTube chat, which is free for everybody to watch, and members get to ask the questions. So if you happen to know a member and you're not a member and you want to ask a question, text that member and tell them what to ask for you, or join, which would be even better, because then you get to ask it yourself and even maybe have a little dialogue there. All right, so I see folks are coming in kind of at a dribble, kind of like they usually do. So the way we do the live chat, before I say that, in the next 3 months, is that right? The next 3 months, the live chats are going to be on 4th Sunday. So sometimes these end up on 3rd Sunday, sometimes they end up on 4th Sunday, and recently they've ended up on 4th Sunday because 3rd Sunday has been like Easter, and then there's Father's Day coming up, and 3rd Sunday seems to be designated as special days for special events or holidays, and so what we know is that it's either going to be on the 3rd Sunday or 4th Sunday. But for the May, June, and July live stream chats will be on the 4th Sunday. If you want to go ahead and put those on your calendar, we wouldn't object at all. So I think maybe we've got enough folks in here now that we could go ahead and get started with the meat of this thing. Are you ready over there? Okay, so what we'll do now is I have made a short little video for you explaining things about overcast sky or that you might not be aware of, you might be aware of, but it's about things that we find differences in the overcast sky as compared with a sky that's sunlit or direct lit, I call it. So Roger will run the video, and please, if you would, it would help out a lot. Wait about asking questions until the end of the video, and that way we can all keep up together. Okay? All right, Roger, if you're ready, cue up that video, and I'll see you folks on the other side. Azaleas in these two photos, they were taken just one day apart and from the same azalea plant. In overcast light, the kinds of differences we find here, we can find everywhere in overcast light. But before we pinpoint those, let's examine what causes the character of light to change in overcast light versus direct sunlight. As the sun's rays move through the layer of overcast, they break up and scatter in random directions that causes them to average out and diffuse, providing an equal lighting from the sky. The diffusion causes a weaker light, and the overcast filters the yellow out of the sun, causing a cooler light. Let's find out now what that does to the azaleas we looked at earlier. Notice that the sun is coming from this direction in the photo taken under direct sunlight, but it's coming from this direction in the one taken in overcast light. Because the light source is the sky, caused by the broken rays coming through the overcast, then the light is coming from overhead in the indirect light source, and the light is much weaker. Because the light is much weaker, we don't see the cast shadows in overcast light that we see in direct light. Here's an example. The light coming in this direction causes this petal to cast this shadow. Notice how distinct the shadow is and how much darker this cast shadow is than the area around it being hit by light. Compare that with what's happening in the overcast photo. Wherever we look for petals, say this petal here, that's more aligned with the sky, we see this darker underneath here, but we don't see that distinct cast shadow. We see a little bit of a cast shadow right here because this petal is so close to this petal. But most of what we're seeing here is a very soft gradation of light, where we could expect there to be a cast shadow. We see more of a gradation of light into shadow and shadow into light. So the cast shadows we see in overcast light are very soft, much weaker, and we see them gradating from light into shadow, whereas the cast shadows in direct light are very distinct, with a sharp value difference between where the shadow is being cast and where the light is striking. Another distinct difference between what the overcast light does to images and what direct sunlight does is the temperature of color. We can see that here again in this close-up comparison of these two flowers of the azalea bush. I'll go here with my color reader and let's just click on a light spot where we can see the areas the light is under the overcast. Now the color reader has its reds divided. The cooler reds are the ones that lean more towards violet are on this side of the reader, and the warmer reds, the ones that lean more towards orange, are on this side. And when I clicked on this section of that blossom, you can see that this is where it lands on the cooler side. I'll click around some more and just watch this little dot right here as I click around, and you see wherever I click in the areas that are lighter, we see it registering here in the cool red. Watch what happens when I go over to where the direct light is hitting. I'll click again on the warm side, and you see the reader jumped over to the warm of the red. I'll click some more of those light areas and see it just stays there. It just goes in different places on the saturation and the value level. So you can see that comparison of how the temperature changes. We have the cooler temperatures under overcast light, and we have the warmer temperatures in direct sunlight. Another difference between the two light sources is value, the range of value. Now, in order for you to see this more clearly, let's throw these two into a lower saturation like this. Let's compare this flower with this one. They're both turned in the same direction. Now, to explain, remember the light source in this one is coming from above, from the sky. The entire sky is the light source. In this one, the light source is coming from this direction and slightly behind. So let's take this one and this one, since both blossoms are turned in the same direction, and let's compare the value range. To do this, I'm going to clone this section right here. I'm going to clone it right down here. Let's just start in the center. I'm going to work our clone out and let you watch. I'll just move it right up into there. It won't hurt anything. And let's see, how much can we clone to get a real good comparison of what's happening with the value range there. Then I'll clone it on into these lightest sections right up here. Let's bring it on down right there. Now that's probably enough. Now I'm going to go over to the other side and clone a similar section from that blossom and put them side by side so you can see the range of value. So I'll start again in the center right here, and you already see that the dark in the center is much darker than the center of the one we just cloned. I'm going to just keep going here, and I'm going to pull it up into the light now so you see the light range a little bit better. That's probably adequate. First of all, notice that the values in this one are gradating. We talked about that earlier. Whereas the values in this one are contrasting. But look at the difference in the dark here and the light here as compared with the dark here and the light here. Now what we see is a value range in this one, in the overcast one, that is closer than the value range in this one. Now to show you that in another way, let's remove the clone. Let's bring over the color reader. Now remember, the value range on the color reader is on this outside arc. So if I take the value reader and I read, we'll say, the lightest part of this petal. Notice right here, you keep an eye on this part right here. Now I'm going to go over on this side. I'm going to read the lightest part of this petal. Now do you notice that value range? It's in the light where we lose values in overcast light. Overcast light does not have the brilliance of the center light or even the halftone one that direct light gives us. All these characteristics are specifics we can look for when we're painting in overcast light. It's never a good idea to make rules about these things, because if you think about it, a rule prevents us from accurately observing what's actually there. It's better if we approach our subject with questions. Where is the light source coming from? What is it doing to the shadows especially the cast shadows? What is it doing to the temperature of color? What is it doing to the range of value, especially in the light values? Where are the values gradating? Are any of the values contrasting? By observing to find the answers to these questions, then we can approach the painting with more integrity. We can approach the painting with more meaning and even enhance some of those areas that might be slightly dull. Like Richard Schmid, we can become an artist who explores by observing, and taking those observations, we will be able to enhance them to create a painting that is more than a mere copy of nature, but a unique expression of nature. Let's pause now and let you ask your questions. Okay, I'm ready for your questions now. If any questions surface while you are watching that little introduction, while you're getting your questions ready, is one thing I want to emphasize. Those of you who are accustomed to my quick tips or my lessons or whatever, probably pretty much gathered by now, I don't like rules. I hate rules. What I discovered early on in my own career was that it was rules that kept me from seeing what I needed to see. If you are observing your reference or your subject matter for a painting, and you're going to be thinking, or if you're in the habit of following a bunch of rules that you've been taught or whatever, the tendency is to not look beyond that, to take that rule as gospel and not look beyond that. But we don't need anything interfering with our ability to observe. So the better way to approach anything, whether it's a principle of composing or whether it's a reference that we're looking at getting ready to paint, the better thing is to ask questions. And my role as your teacher is to teach you how to ask those questions so that you can discover for yourself what you're seeing, how you're seeing it, and how you might use that in your painting or not use it in your painting, however that comes up. So here comes the first question. Debbie says, is it difficult to convert a reference in indirect light to a painting with more direct lighting? Recommendations on how. Debbie, I wouldn't call it difficult, but the issue is that when you are developing a painting that you want to interpret as indirect lighting, the first thing is to decide from which direction the direct lighting is coming. In other words, last month's workshop, last month's whatever this is, chat. Last month's chat was on conveying or recognizing where the light source is, and here's the way it goes, something like this. And if you can visualize what I'm about to show you, then it can become relatively easy to do. But you decide which direction you want the sunlight coming from. Now, in order to do that, you know all these places in the sky that the sun can be coming from. It can be coming from directly overhead, or it can be coming from our, my right, or it could be coming from our left. The sun could be coming from straight ahead, which would give your subject a backlight, or the sun could be somewhere behind us. So wherever that sun is located in the sky and at whatever angle, so it's going to be located in a spot in the sky and at an angle. So if it's lower down, it's going to have a lower angle. If it's higher up, it's going to have a higher up angle. Let me go a different way on this. Anyway, the thing to do is to visualize the rays coming from that direct light source and looking at your reference that's in an overcast light, imagine where those rays would be hitting the strongest, and imagine where they would be causing cast shadows, and then not imagine, but visualize. Now, the surfaces most directly aligned with the light source are going to catch most light, the most light. And then as surfaces bend away from the light source, they'll catch fewer light rays. So that would be a darker value. As they've been even further away from the light source, the direction of the light source, they're catching even fewer rays, and that's even a darker value. Surfaces that are not receiving light rays, so if I'm the light ray coming this direction, and say my hand over here is what's in the path of the light, the backside of my hand would not be receiving any light rays, so that's in shadow. So to be able to visualize the direction where the sun is in its direction and in this angle, and then visualize how those rays are hitting, your reference that you're now looking at that's in overcast light, when you can have several exercises when you can practice several exercises where you're doing that, you get the idea about how you go about it. Now, one thing that helps in that is to actually paint in a direct light. When you're painting a direct light source, a subject that's in the direct light source, and you're painting that subject, to develop that awareness of where the sun is located, what angle, what position and what angle that sun is located, and observe what it's doing to what the light rays are doing to the surfaces that they are capturing. And when you get used to looking for that, or to seeing that and seeing the effects, the results of what happens to images, to what happens to various planes of images in their proximity to the light rays, you get used to reading that informs you then as to how to handle an overcast subject that you want to convert into light rays. Now, that might have sounded contorted and complicated. It's not really that complicated if you take one step at a time and just look for what the light rays are doing to the subject, or what they would be doing to any subject that's in direct light. And I think you'll find it's a lot of fun, but that's how I go about it, and I think that's probably your best way. Don't try to make rules about it. Just go by what light rays do when they hit surfaces, and where they cause shadows to fall and that sort of thing, and look for that, and you will find exactly what you need in the way of information. And Debbie, if you had any follow-up question about that, feel free to answer. Okay, let's see. The next one was Rich. What is the overall effect of color saturation under overcast sky? What we find, if you think about it, Rich, under the overcast sky, the images, the color is not receiving the amount of light that will give us a reading of the fully saturation of color. Now, that's going to also depend upon the thickness of the overcast. If the overcast is relatively thin, we'll be able to see more saturation in color, in the hue of color, than we will be if the overcast is very thick, because it's the amount of two things. One is the amount of light that is received by an image that can show us the full saturation. Now, beyond that, add to that, this probably won't happen under overcast, but in direct light, where the surfaces are hit very, very, very strong, it can actually bleach out the saturation where the light's hitting more directly, and where in the areas right around where the light's hitting more directly. So but in overcast light, the problem with our being able to see, sometimes we can see the full saturation, I said before, depending upon the thickness or the thinness of the overcast, but also because the light rays are filtered out, or the color, the warmth of the color is filtered out. For warm colors that are warm in hue, they won't feel quite the full saturation because that warm light is not emphasizing that saturation. So just observe the saturation by comparing what you see with what you know to be the most fully saturated version of that color. Let's see, Ellen, wondering that also, Rich, in the flower photo looked like less chromosaturation overcast. Yes, it did. Now that particular one, it was very, very overcast, and so the saturation of the hue was reduced somewhat. But we got to realize that everything is relative. That's one reason why it's never a good idea to make rules about these things. If the overcast had been very, very slight, we would have been able to see a little more saturation of the hue in the one that's overcast. So you can look for it to be less, although you might be able to see more saturation for the thinner overcast. And then, let's see, is that Debbie? Would developing a not a first a note? Did you mean note, Debbie? The first step. Your explanation was helpful. Would developing a note at first be helpful? At first, did you mean developing a note at first be helpful for the first step? Would you ask that again, Debbie? I'm having trouble understanding exactly what you're asking there. And meanwhile, I'll go to Ellen while I'm waiting for you to ask me there. Ellen's asked, but I know there's less saturation in bright light or shadow than halftone. Yes, overcast doesn't mean more halftone as it may appear. But see, these things are varying. Now, in halftone, it's usually about those halftone when we're looking in direct light. Most commonly, in my experience, we're going to find that fully saturation of a hue if we're looking at a rounded surface. For a rounded surface that is a highly saturated local color, we'll find that fully saturation right there, right in the halftone 3 to transition area usually. And so I have seen in a very thin overcast, I have seen that degree of saturation appear in cooler colors. I find it may or may not appear in warmer colors simply because of the weakness of the light rays. So just know what you're looking for there, and compare what you're observing to what you know to be the highest saturation. Rhea, am I pronouncing your name right? Let me know. Is it Rhea or Rhea? She says, I've noticed that on cloudy, rainy days, the colors look more vivid. Am I seeing stronger saturation in the colors? Well, I guess it depends on, I don't exactly know how to answer that because I can't make a rule about what's causing what, not knowing the situation. Now, if you and I were standing together and observing on a cloudy, rainy day, if we're observing saturation together, we could. I would have an easier time describing to you what we're seeing. So a lot of times, I think maybe this might help. A lot of times, the saturation that we see will be emphasized because what's around it will be desaturated. So the desaturation of the rain, perhaps, or of the maybe other images that are around it on an overcast day could could make our vision see with more emphasis the actual saturation. You know, it's our eyes recording this stuff. It's the way our eyes are recording them, and our eyes will record, or our eyes will respond to a saturation as being more saturated if it's surrounded by desaturation. Desaturation emphasizes saturation. So there's that. And I hope I didn't confuse you on that one. Okay, Bobsy says, how does one enhance form when there is little or no shadow? Yeah, if you'll notice, let's see. Let me say. You mean how does one enhance color? I guess, Bobsy. When we are painting under overcast sky, the painting itself, if the overcast sky was very heavily overcast, especially in the wintertime when there's not a lot of foliage, everything can look very, very gray. In a painting, we can enhance that by adding just a tiny bit more saturation to the hues that we observe images being, or the local color, the local hue. For example, you might observe of dead leaves on the ground in the wintertime under a very cloudy day or very overcast day. You might observe those leaves and you would call them brown. Well, you know, brown is not a hue. Brown is a generic name we use for a low saturated orange or yellow orange or red orange. Brown is used for all three. So what we can do, we can enhance that just a little bit if we want to use that for a painting. And you can do very exciting paintings under overcast sky. If we want to use that for a painting, in the areas not in shadow, we might just put a little bit more saturation than we're really seeing into those areas. Now, in the shadow parts, it depends on the tube color, I think. So in the shadow parts, if you're using a transparent tube color that is, say, falling in the same hue range as what you're looking at, the transparent tube colors can give us the interpretation of shadow, but they can also enhance the hue just enough so that it feels a little more lively than what we're actually looking at. Now, the comparison of that would be if you were, going back to my dead leaves on the ground, for the shadows underneath there, you might observe that you might be seeing a very, very low saturated, well, let's see, well, you could just see a very, very low saturation of red, orange, or even sometimes we might even see a very, very low saturation of violet. Well, if it were red, orange, if you have a transparent oxide red, which is a red, orange, that the transparent oxide red as it comes out of the tube is red, orange, is also transparent enough and dark enough that it can give you the value of the shadow while at the same time adding just enough hue to it to give it some life or some vibrancy. Oh, Debbie, should have been no tan. Okay, now let me go back up and say she was saying no tan. Let's see, where is that? Debbie's question. Okay, she was saying, would developing a no tan first be helpful? Developing a no tan first is always helpful because it gives you that shadow pattern, that shadow light pattern. Now, when you're doing a painting of an overcast sky, it's different. Sometimes it's a little tricky when you're doing the no tan. It's a little tricky to know where the light part of no tan ends and the shadow part begins. but you sort of just have to guess at the pattern there, because the pattern of the light is going to fall pretty consistently. So in my work, it always helps to find that shadow light pattern first, where I take all the values out and I'm looking at it merely as a pattern of light and shadow, because that not only gives me the value structure I'm looking at, but it also, if I want to sort of tweak that a little bit to give it just a little bit more attention, or make it a little bit more exciting as as compositionally, then I can do that and then follow that pattern when I develop the painting. So it can't hurt. A no-tan can never hurt, Debbie. All right, thanks for clarifying that. Yes, I think it always helps. If you, in my experience, if I can determine the light and shadow pattern first as a pattern, not as shadow of or light of, but as a total pattern of what I'm looking at. I'm seeing the structure. That's what the light and shadow pattern gives. That's the no-tan. And in my experience, when I can locate that first, I've got a handle on how I can interpret that in a painting. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, go on to Amazon and buy my latest book called The Art of No-Tan. It's all spelled out for you right there. And that was a shameless plug, and I don't care. All right. Thank you for making that clearer. I hope I did. I never know whether I'm making these questions clearer or not. What? Rhea. Ah. Okay, I was nowhere near, was I?
Yeah.
I was close. Well, anyway, good. All right. I'm glad to know that. All right. Ellen says, I think Barbara Rowe or Bobsy may mean how to show the depth of a shape, as make a sphere look more like a ball than a circle without the light and shadow to help. I wonder about that. Oh, you're talking about a sphere. A form in Overcast light. Okay, yes. All right. So here's what's going to happen in Overcast light, and you can look for it. Don't take it as a rule, and don't take it as it's the end of the discussion. Observe what happens. What happens? The light is coming from above. The light's not coming from the side. The light's coming from everywhere. But this earth of ours is so large compared to us, our tiny little selves, right there where that ball, wherever it is, and that the light really is coming down like this, and you'll notice it. And when you notice any change in angle, it's not the light angle that's changing, it's the angle of the shape that's changing. So the light's coming from above on a form, like a ball or whatever. And if that form is anyway on something else that's turned, just look for where the light is hitting it the strongest. You will see a gradual gradation of light that continues around that ball or around that form until it starts turning away, until it starts turning away from the light. And you'll see that the value of that will be very, very close. It will be very similar to just in a kind of a inverse of what I showed you there in the little azalea petal when I was showing you the difference. I've shown you the one petal on one side in Overcast light. I was talking about the value range, the one petal on one side, and I pointed out that it's gradating in, and so that's just the inverse of what we can observe on a rounded form on the outside. It would be a very subtle gradation, and the darks in that case may or may not be as distinct as they will be in direct light. Also, if the form is sitting by itself, if it's like a single ball sitting by itself, then the light rays are coming down, and whatever cast shadow we see directly underneath that is very subtle and gradated out. The cast shadow from the ball, where you see the ball sitting on the surface, it's going to have all the light squeezed out, but the cast shadow is gradating out into light, and sometimes depending upon the size of the shape and a number of other factors. Sometimes in Overcast, you won't really be able to observe clearly where that cast shadow ends and light begins. That's just how subtle gradation we can observe. So maybe I made that clearer that time. Ellen says, great book, I'm reading it now. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, Debbie says, another subject that's greatly affected by overcast skies is the color you see in the ocean or other body of water versus water in bright, direct light. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And especially bodies of water that don't have an inherent color within them. You can often observe in big, huge bodies of water, such as the ocean. We remember what we're seeing on top of that water is like a mirror. Of course, the water is moving, and of course, it's moving with more force sometimes than it is at others. But because the whole dome of the sky is overcast, that is reflecting into the water itself. And so things get very, very close in value and very, very close, very, very, very desaturated in hue, because we don't see the brilliance of those colors that we will see when things are in direct light. And that varies too, depending on the thickness of the overcast, and also other things that might be interfering. Like a lot of times when we see overcast, we also see fog involved in that. Now that's atmospheric effect. The fog is an atmospheric effect. Anything that interferes, fog, smoke, all those things are atmospheric effects, and they can you might say, join forces with the overcast and affect the way we see images. So it's a good idea to be able to observe and ask yourself the questions of what do you see? What do you see in the way of value? When you look at two images and you compare their value differences, what are you seeing in terms of value differences? When you look at two images and compare their hues, their colors, what are you seeing in terms of differences? So it's always better we will see more when we compare things together than we will if we're just looking at one thing and trying to decide what we're looking at. So a lot of times it's difficult if you're just looking at one thing and trying to decide what you're looking at, or trying to determine what value am I looking at. A lot of times it can be very, very confusing if you're not comparing it with something else, preferably comparing it with something else within that same area in which you're looking. All right, soften edges, yes, indeed, Bobs. It's soften. I didn't put enough emphasis on that in the video, but there you will see a lot of soft edges in overcast sky, and even images that in overcast sky when you're a little bit further back from them. The edges appear softer, a little bit softer than they appear, say, edges that have distinct image or seem to have distinct edges. They appear a little softer than they do in direct light. So that softness of edges is a real characteristic in overcast, in what we can see in overcast light. So, where are we now, Roger?
Ellen said it's a great book. I'm reading it now.
Yeah. I commented on that.
Okay.
Yeah, y'all read that book? Great book.
I was thinking about, as far as the color on the ocean question, and it's basically water is just a mirror. It's reflecting what it sees. So if it's overcast, real cloudy day, then it's going to reflect the clouds.
Right.
If it's not, then it's going to reflect the blue coming from the
That's right.
sky.
That's right. I think we can't overemphasize that. The fact people say, "How do you paint water?" You don't paint the water. you paint what the water is reflecting, because that's what we're seeing in the water. Okay, Rich says, wait a minute, something's popped up there, Roger. There's a window popped up there.
Yeah.
There we go. things in the distance can even be cooler in overcast light is a question mark. Perhaps yes, depending on what those things are. I always hesitate about saying anything as finite. What you're looking at right now, this image behind me, you see the mountain range itself. In the more distant range, you see as cooler in temperature than you see the areas up closer to us. So depending upon the color depending on everything else, and also upon the thickness of the atmosphere, you can look for it to be cooler simply because the rays the way those dispersed rays are coming down from everywhere, and they're coming down instead of in a particular direction, except from above, most likely. But I'm hesitating because there are always exceptions, and the minute I say it will always be cooler, somebody's going to find where, oh, there's something up there appears warmer than it does right here a little closer in. That's only because there was a difference in color or something else interfering. So I can say, Rich, look for it, but don't make a rule. No, don't make a rule. You know, I would say 80% of what I have learned about painting is through pure observation, learning how to observe and how to ask those questions as a result of having experience in observing and painting, and also observing what master painters have done, observing how they how they are I don't like the word translating, expressing, discovering, or asking questions about how they are expressing images, relationship to each other. And learning to ask questions is your best bet. Never make a rule when you can ask a question. Of course, as a child, I asked too many questions, and I sometimes would get in trouble for that. But that's just been my nature throughout my life. Ellen says, I love the mirror idea, easy to remember. Yeah. It's always a good idea to also ask, why is a color, if there's something that you know to be a particular local color, but when you're looking at it, it's not that local color, ask yourself, what's causing it to appear the way I see it? That's a wonderful question to ask. In our area, especially in the wintertime, we will often see, we live in the lower mountains of northeast Georgia, and we will often see, especially when we're driving up maybe even 5 or 10 miles from here, we can see the full layer of mountain ranges, and we'll often see them leaning a little bit more towards violet. And I guess that's where the Purple Mountains Majesty comes from. Yeah. And so I remember how delighted I was when I had been talking about that to my family. When my sister-in-law first noticed that the mountains were actually purple. I love it. Okay, other questions. We're getting close to the wind-down point here. So it's a good opportunity to get in another question if you have one. And if you know that these videos, these live chats that we have are being recorded, and they then are available on YouTube. I guess we call that evergreen. They're evergreen on YouTube afterwards. So if you want to watch this again, you can always go to our website, you go to our channel page, which is in the studio art instruction at YouTube, youtube.com/in the studio art instruction. I know that's a lot to say, but that's what it is. If you click on live, there's a menu there on our main channel page, And if you click on live there, you're going to find all the live chats that we've done in the past. How many years we've been doing this now? About 4?
10?
No, not the live chats.
Oh, live chat.
Yeah, we've been doing.
This is number 52. So
This is number 52. So
52
go
months.
figure, huh?
52 months.
52 months we've been doing this, to be precise, right? Okay, Ellen asks, would an overcast sky change your composition ideas? Well, it depends on what your composition ideas are. I would say this. Get your ideas from what you're looking at. If you're looking at an overcast sky, I don't know, are you talking more specifically about particular principles in composition? Every time I go outside and it's overcast, I do something else. Ah, that one. Well, let's change that. When you go outside and it's overcast, look for an opportunity. Look for an opportunity to paint. What you can look for there is start looking for what the light is doing. Remember, look, you know that light's coming from overhead. Start looking for what that light is doing and just choose an area and do a study of it instead of trying to do a painting of something that's going to blow the world away. It's through studies that we learn, and we can't do too many studies. And by studies, I mean you're not trying to create a painting, but you're simply observing what's there, and you're studying it. You're studying what the color is doing. You're studying what the value is doing. You're studying what the edges are doing. You're studying what the shapes are doing to each other. You can find your own placement of that, and sometimes you can find very nice design or compositional ideas from an overcast sky. Now you can look through Richard, if you've got Richard books, if you got Richard Schmid's book, Alla Prima too, especially, but even the first one, Alla Prima, you will notice that he has a number of paintings that he did from overcast sky. It's not just the drama of direct lights and shadows will do that gives you a wonderful composition. Often you can find exciting things going on within an overcast sky where you can begin to see those subtle things, light and shadow are doing. The shadow's still there. They're more subtle though. And so just studying those things, many times you'll be surprised at how many refreshing composition ideas you can get from just studying what's there. But no, I don't want to say don't. Let's not do just half the world. Let's use the whole. Let's not use just half the world. Let's use the whole world as our reference, which means it's not a good idea to reject something because there might be an idea it might not be exciting. Take another look at it from a different viewpoint and see if you don't find something there that might just stimulate an idea. I've taken your study concept to heart, have tons of them. It's probably the biggest help I had in learning to paint. Ellen says, thank you, Ellen. Oh, you have his book. Good. Go through it. And look, there are several paintings in there that are obviously under overcast. And there's some in there that are under overcast where they may have a little beam of light coming through the sky. And we'll find that too. That can be a really fun thing to do. So you look at what Richard, and just not just to look at it, just to ooh and ah over it, but study what he's done with the color. Study what he's observed. Study how he might have enhanced it a little bit. Study what he's done with those edges and how he's gradated those edges, and where he might have sneaked in a little bit of an emphasis on an edge, perhaps where one might not have been there. I think that you will find inspiration beyond inspiration just by taking that viewpoint, studying with an open mind of what causes this to happen. What does this do to this? How does this look as compared to this? And sometimes you can even hold your hand up and block things out and discover things. This is one of my favorite things to do when I go outside. One of my favorite things to do is to I put my hands together like this and I close one eye and I just go around like this. And when I go to do plein air painting, I don't usually go to do plein air painting for a particular subject. Let's go to a place and see what's there. And I'll start out like this. I just start out like this, and I just start scanning the sky, scanning the area. I scan it up, and I scan it down. And then when I find something that, I see something there I want to find out more about, and then I'll make myself, I've got this little, a lot of times I'll just use my fingers like this and make myself a little window like that and kind of find out where I want that to fall in, where my limitations would be there, and go from there. So you'll be surprised at what a difference it can make. You actually get excited about going out and discovering potential. It looks like we've gotten a whole lot of gifts coming. Huh?
You has sent 50 in the studio art instruction gift memberships. And these are people that receive memberships.
Hugh, bless you for that. Bless you, bless you, bless you. Wow. So, what will we send Hugh for that?
Oh, man. Whatever he wants.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. Well, that is a wonderful and high note to end this chat. I'm going to look at my watch. It's exactly time for us to end. So thank you all for joining in with us and for making this, what was for me, an exciting time. And we hope to see, hope you all will join us again next month on the 4th Sunday of May. Of course, we'll be sending out announcements. And bless J. Hugh Craft for sending 50 in the studio art instruction gift memberships. Wow, that's all I can say. So on that note, bye-bye for now.